Welcome to You Multicultural channel. My name is Jocelyn Gilbert, and today at the Newcomer Network, we are going to talk about a very interesting topic. It's microaggressions. Yes, if you haven't heard about that word, we are going to learn it today. Robyn, welcome.
Thank you. So great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming and with such a wonderful topic, microaggressions. But before we start, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me here. I'm Robyn Penner. Great to be here. I'm a diversity, equity, inclusion consultant, and I work primarily with workplaces, helping them create cultures where everyone feels welcome, where everyone feels included, whatever their cultural differences are, whether it's ethnicity, religious difference, maybe they have a physical disability or a learning disability. There's a whole range of kind of cultural identities that I help workplaces create more inclusion and that feeling of belonging. That's, I guess in a nutshell, that's what I do.
Yeah, and I know that you're very passionate about your profession. Can you tell us a little bit about why you are so passionate about it?
You know, I get that question a lot. People kind of look at me probably as a white Canadian person and they think, why are you devoting so much energy to this? And I wish I could show you a picture of my family because it might surprise you. It often surprises people, but we have a family that is multicultural ourselves. We have two children who we adopted who were born in Kenya. So my husband and I actually lived in Kenya for 7 years. And during that time, our family grew. And so when we returned to Manitoba, we came home as a family with two white parents and two black children. And then we had another child who is white. But I've watched my two children grow up in Manitoba and noticed that their experience was very different than mine was, or even than our other daughter was, because of the color of their skin. And as I kind of noticed coming through school or in different experiences, you know, our son, when he became a teenager, he would be watched by security when he would go to the mall or he'd walk around, you know, in a store. The shop owner would kind of follow him and his buddies, or, you know, have lots of stories actually of their experiences.
Wow.
But I just thought, you know, how can I create a workplace or help our province to be more inclusive? That really is where my passion came out of, is my kids. It's pretty personal.
Wow, I was wondering, does this happen in Canada?
Yeah, I know. People are like, really, you know, they think it happens in other places. And it does. And whether it's like my son as a teenage boy, you know, when he was a teenager, he had his hoodie, he had his hands in his pocket because he's shy. And yet he was viewed with such suspicion. Or I can tell you a couple of stories. So our daughter moved to Alberta when she was 19. She was working in a Walmart there. But when she would go do her grocery shopping, when she wasn't on duty, so she didn't have her vest, she didn't have her name tag, so security would follow her around. So in the store that she was working, like she was an employee there, and yet she would be followed by security. There are so many stories I could tell you about, being treated differently. And I know that for my kids, it's their skin color. For other people, it might be they wear a hijab or they have some kind of racial, religious garb. There's, you know, people get treated differently for a lot of reasons, and it happened to my kids.
Wow, and this is how you came up with this wonderful profession.
Yeah, I thought, how can I make a difference? And specifically, so when I started to notice it was the place that I was working, and I noticed that maybe people who were not part of the dominant culture, like the mainstream in that workplace, how people kind of felt like on the fringes, or maybe they weren't, you know, their voices weren't heard in the same way. Their opinions in a meeting, maybe it wasn't taken quite as weightily as someone else. And I thought, that's going to be the experience of my kids. So I really started to think, how can I help create workplaces where everyone feels like they belong, like they matter, that they want to show up at work because their opinions are going to be taken seriously. And so that's kind of the path that brought me to where I am today.
Our main audience in this program is newcomers. And I remember I attended one of your workshops, the Microaggressions, and I said, no, I have to bring Robyn with our community, because you mentioned few things that really impacted me. So I would like you to tell me a little bit about what a microaggression is.
Yeah, because it's a great question. I'm so glad you found that workshop meaningful. And I would say that the response tends to be people find it to really connect with them because we don't talk about it. It's a word, it's not that common. People are often asking me, what is a microaggression? So let me just start by saying the definition that we work with is it's a seemingly insignificant comment. So that's one part of it. It seems small, right? So we think it's no big deal. So it's a seemingly insignificant, and I'll talk more about that, comment, but it's directed towards someone that's part of a culturally marginalized group. So it's not just any rude comment. It's not just any kind of insult someone might give. So it really, to be considered a microaggression, it's directed towards maybe a marginalized or culturally marginalized group. And it conveys some kind of bias. So it's usually based on some assumption, some stereotype. And it doesn't have to be intentional. In fact, often it's unintentional. People aren't intending to do harm. They might even think they're being friendly. Like it's really, and what I really love about this workshop that we do on microaggressions is when people hear and they understand like what the impact is or what their comments, how they come across, they can change it, right? It's one of those things where once you know, I mean, I don't know if you remember this quote, we're doing the best we can with what we know, but when we know better, we can do better. Like that's a quote we talk a lot about. So when you understand really the harm and impact of microaggressions, you can stop doing them. You can decide I'm going to change, or I'm going to interrupt if I hear someone else making a comment that in the past, you know, I might have thought, it's just small. It's this tiny little comment, no big deal. When you realize the impact, you start to step in and you start to be an ally, or you change your own behavior. So yeah, that's the gist of it.
Having this self-awareness. For example, I remember I told someone, and have you tried to wear any normal clothes? Immediately, I catch it up. Oh, sorry. I apologized.
Fantastic.
Because, okay, for me, normal clothes, it's wearing jeans, a dress, but for that person, normal clothes is what that was her normal.
Yep.
But I had this awareness. But sometimes we make comments based on things that we appear to be normal for us, but we can be hurting someone else's feelings.
And awareness is for sure the first step. Like, it's not that we don't make mistakes or that we don't sometimes say something that has a negative impact, but if we become aware of it, we can apologize. And that's one of the things we talk about is like, what do you do when you realize that maybe you did cause harm, or, you come to the workshop and you realize like, and in fact, we've had people come up to us later and say, after your workshop, I went to my coworker because I realized I'd made a comment and I apologized. And when we hear that, I just feel like that's so inspiring, I guess, or encouraging. But one of the things when we talk about harm, again, so tiny comments, think they're no big deal. But I don't know if you remember Amna Berkey, she's my co-facilitator, colleague, death by 1,000 paper cuts. That's when we talk about microaggressions, it's like you think of a paper cut, teeny tiny thing, 1,000 paper cuts. Well, right? That's what microaggressions are. They're teeny, seemingly small comments, but they add up because often the people who are the target, they get them over and over and over again. So those little comments become really quite impactful, quite harmful, in fact.
Yeah. Can you share with us some of those examples?
Yeah, I have so many stories I could share. I mean, I'll tell a story about hair because this is one of my daughter's experience. So growing up, elementary school, she would do her hair in all kinds of ways, like extensions, braids. Sometimes she would wear it natural, like in an afro. Sometimes she would have it chemically relaxed. So just, she's a little girl, ponytails, all of the things. And then I noticed when she got to be kind of about middle school, junior high age, she refused to go to school with her hair in an afro. Like she just refused. And I was like, why? Because I thought she looked so great and she looked so she could totally rock it. She looked fantastic. And then she told me some of the stories of like what happened to her at school when she had her hair in an afro. Kids would call her Aunt Jemima. Like, I don't know if
Wow.
pancake syrup, that picture on the pancake syrup. They would tease her like saying, did you stick your finger in an electric socket this morning? And for little girls, like to be joked about that way. So I kind of got it. But those kind of comments actually are still made to adults or in the workplace. And it really can be as simple as, is that your real hair? Or can I touch your hair? Is there such a common one, especially for black people or black female hairstyles?
So many people ask me that.
Yeah. And the impact might be different for different people depending on their own story or, their experience. Not everyone would have the same reaction, but often it really causes them to feel othered. So that's one example. Like, is that your real hair? Complimenting people on or commenting on their English ability. So sometimes it'll just be, do you speak English? Or they might say, you speak English so well, or, you're so articulate. Again, their intentions are they think they're giving a compliment. But what they're actually it's almost like not humiliating, insulting. Like the people that often they feel like they may have grown up in Canada. It might be just based on the fact that their skin is a different color. And in fact, I've had that happen to a colleague of mine where someone gave her a compliment on how she spoke English, and she found it so deeply insulting because, she'd basically lived in Canada her whole life. So that's, what are some others? So that's on there.
When they ask you where you're from.
I was just going to give that one. So people often with very good intentions will say, where are you from? And then the person might say, well, I'm from Winnipeg. No, where are you really from? Well, I'm from Transcona, or I'm from wherever, St. Vital. No, but where are you really from? This question of, and this assumption is like, you're obviously not from here, or that's what they're conveying. The messaging is because of your skin color or because of your accent or because of your religious attire, whatever it is, you obviously can't be from here. So it's, we said the definition of a microaggression is it conveys some kind of stereotype or bias, and it's very othering. And so even though the person might be trying to be friendly or they think they're like showing interest, the impact. So this is where someone's intention isn't really what matters. It's the impact that it's having. And I don't know if you remember, and I won't have the quote directly, but this idea of, people often think, their feelings are just being heard, like it's a small thing. But there was this one quote we use, and it's not about having your feelings hurt. It's about being dismissed. It's about being alienated. It's about being minimized. Like really all of these comments, they kind of add up. They add up to this impact of someone really feeling dismissed, alienated, othered, and it can affect things like mental health. It can affect their self-esteem, and it affects mortality. Like people apparently have like higher rates of heart disease because of this ongoing experience of being the target of microaggressions. This is why I'm so passionate about, raising awareness and talking about it, because I think a lot of people experience it.
We're coming from a culture that it's so much funny, so calling people's names. If you are skinny, I can call you stick. Mm-hmm. If you have some more weight, I will call you a ball. Or if you are more than certain age, I will call you old lady. We used to do lots.
Yeah.
And when we come here, we are not aware that other people might take it different. So what would be something we should be considering? Because we are exposed to multicultural workplaces, at school, everywhere, not to make those comments.
Yeah. No, great question. And in fact, it's very interesting, the response that I get from people, if I go to a workplace and I've done a workshop on microaggressions, for example, the responses that people get, that I get from people, I'll just to kind of generalize, but like white people often think, wow, I had no idea. Like they're shocked and surprised and often can think of all the comments that they've made. But it's also people from other cultures. One of the things that they'll say, like maybe they are newcomers to Canada or maybe they've experienced some of these, they feel really seen and kind of validated. Like it almost gives language to why it hurts so much or why the impact was what it was. Because they might look around and think, well, nobody else seemed to think that comment was a big deal, or like maybe I misunderstood it. So they often second guess because they felt like they got a punch in the stomach. So hearing the kind of that definition of microaggressions kind of validates their experience, and they often are very grateful. They'll come to me afterwards and say, thank you, because I didn't realize why I felt this heaviness. But they'll also, then the third response is exactly, and I think this is maybe what you were referencing, is newcomers or people who have, their lens or experience of how they might themselves be the target, but recognizing like the others in the group or their colleagues who also are experiencing that, and they weren't intending, they may have made those comments or asked those questions, not realizing that actually the impact was, painful for that person. So there's this kind of light bulbs going on for each one of these groups, kind of with depending on what their experience or their background has been.
Calling up people a person monkey.
It happens.
Right.
It totally happens. In fact, my husband's a teacher, and I know this last fall he had heard a student being called a monkey in the hallway, and just kind of, we know that kids are cruel. We know kids joke, and I know that they followed up, they had some conversations, but I think we're less aware of how it happens in the workplace. So kids being mean, maybe in elementary school in the playground, we kind of think, okay, we need to teach them better manners. But what about when it's, we're adults, we're at work or church, or we're at a community center, or we're, at the swimming pool, at the Y, whatever. It's happening in all those same places.
A friend of mine told me, I felt really bad when someone told me why I'm going to the gym if I'm not losing weight. And I was like, wow, this, she felt really bad with that comment.
Yeah. And the good thing is when people, and especially friends or people that feel safe with us, when they come and tell us, then we can do better next time, right? We can apologize. We can kind of file that away so that I continue to learn. Like, I'm still learning things that might cause harm, or comments that I used to say and I didn't realize that people were hurt by them. But when they tell me, then I can try to do better. And I'm just, it's hard to hear, like, when you're the person that has made a comment that maybe caused offense, but at least I can try to do better.
Yeah. What do you think we should do if it's someone who make a comment like that to us? For example, a person who tells you, you were not focused when I was talking to you, and you feel like, oh, you're calling me, I'm not attentive.
Yeah.
How can I respond to that person?
Yeah, that's a good example, because a microaggression, and I think of this again in a workplace setting, like in a meeting, it's interesting because you'll notice that some people will pay close attention to who, maybe a male, maybe someone in a senior position, or maybe someone that, you might unconsciously be checking your text or your phone whether it's a female or someone who has an accent or is a different ethnic minority, whatever it is. These are microaggressions when we think what they're saying is less important, or we think, we can be, quickly doing some texting while they're speaking. So what can we do? So I don't know if you remember from the workshop, but we have kind of a whole list of suggestions and recommendations. How do we raise awareness, and how do we respond? If we're the target, we encourage people, well, first you have to decide, is it worth it, right? Is there a relationship here? Is it worth kind of following up on this relationship? Or do you just walk away and just say, you know what, it's not worth my energy to follow up on it? If you're the target and you want to know how to respond, the first thing you have to decide is, do I make a comment? Do I give feedback? Or do I just, and lots of things that factor into that. But also, we often find that just giving the information and inviting conversation can be really helpful. Because if they didn't know, and if you give them the benefit of the doubt that it was intentional, then they can do better next time, because you explain, when you say that, or this is how it landed, like this, it kind of made me feel like what I was saying wasn't important because you seemed kind of distracted, right? Like blaming, shaming, guilt, like that usually isn't a very helpful way for people to kind of do better going forward. But the research shows that if we educate, if we inform, if we pass on kind of this insight, many people, like, it can really help them do better going forward. So,
yeah. And how would we do that if we feel shy to say?
right. So is there someone you can talk to? And, whether it's in the workplace, like then we'd often say, can you go to your supervisor? Can you go to HR? And would they step in and intervene? I mean, we encourage people to bring some of these types of workshops to their workplaces to raise awareness. And I find it really encouraging because when everyone's kind of sat through the same session and this education, they're like, okay, how can we create a workplace where that doesn't happen and make it normal to kind of raise awareness? Like, oh, by the way, we don't make those comments here because we want people to feel valued. So is there someone you could go to if you feel shy? This is where having allies, colleagues, friends who can interrupt and speak up on your behalf. Like that's also, we really try to encourage people who aren't the target to kind of in that moment or even follow up. And I know I've had a colleague who was, in a conversation where a man made a really sexist comment and kind of maybe it was a joke. Well, later on, after that, it was in the staff room during lunch, he went and followed up with that colleague and said, what you said in the staff room, it was really inappropriate. And I want you to, he kind of educated him. He explained to him why what he said was inappropriate. Then he went to the women who'd been at the, listening to this very sexist comment. And he said, I'm really sorry. Like our colleague made this comment. I don't think it was appropriate. And I want you to know that I went and talked to him about it. Then he went to HR. And actually at the time I was working in HR at that organization. He said, this just happened in the lunchroom today. And I talked to the person who made the comment. I talked to the other women who had kind of been the target, I guess, or had to hear it. And I think HR should know about it. So I was really proud of him for taking it seriously. Someone else might have been like, oh, it's just this guy. He makes these jokes. He thinks they're funny, right? And like a lot of people maybe roll their eyes, but they don't take action. So taking action, I think, is a really great way to address it.
Yeah. And also it's important to understand about nonverbal communication when you say roll her eyes or roll his eyes or someone laughing after someone else speaks.
Yeah.
But sometimes they don't mean to something, they don't mean something else. They just...
Yeah.
That's the way they behave. I don't know, culturally. For example, in some cultures, some people don't have eye contact, don't make eye contact. Mm-hmm. Or some people react to stressful situations with a laugh.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. Microaggressions can actually be nonverbal. And some of the ones you mentioned exactly would be classic because it's giving a response, it's kind of dismissing, it's sort of demeaning someone, maybe what they just said or contributed. I know certainly like someone walks in the room and maybe they're wearing some different attire and someone looks them up and down and kind of go, and then they are made to feel really uncomfortable because maybe they don't wear sort of traditional Western clothing. And so they're made to kind of feel judged or less valued because of it wasn't a comment, but it was a look. And they communicated a lot without a word being said.
Yeah, that's true. Why do you think, I know the reason, but I want you to talk about the importance of these workshops and that you are providing. So invite people to come and attend.
Yeah, we know that the workplace in Canada is changing and there's a lot of immigration. There's more generations in the workplace than ever before. I think they're saying 5 generations. And actually a lot of cultural misunderstandings happen across the generations. Microaggressions, eye rolling, either at someone who's too old to learn the new IT program, people who look at the younger generation and think they don't have a good work ethic, right? Like there's assumptions we make that can really... So generational diversity, there's also people with physical disabilities who have opportunities to be, so there's all these changes to the workplace. So how do we create environments and cultures where people feel included? And one of the ways is, and actually one of the starting points I often say is having this conversation around microaggressions. It's a really small topic in a way, but because it has such a big impact and because it's something people can change behavior, like immediately. We see a lot of impact on when people, they've learned something new, they change their behavior. And we find that really encouraging. And so if workplaces are saying we want we have a DEI strategy, diversity, equity, inclusion, or an anti-racism, or whatever their goals are these days for kind of working with their diverse staff, I think a workshop or a couple of workshops on microaggressions and how to address and how to interrupt can be a really important and transformative conversation to have for organizations.
Yeah, it helps us to work together even when we're coming from different cultures, understanding what is appropriate and what is not appropriate.
Exactly.
But also with our clients, if we work with clients too.
Yeah. In fact, I did a workshop with students at a massage college, and we talked about the clients that would be coming into the clinics or wherever they were working, and how to understand for each client that you work with, like what are the things, the comments that could do harm and would be considered sort of hurtful, or how can you create a space that really feels welcoming, inclusive. We've actually also done this workshop with a law firm. And so lawyers, because, they have such different clients coming through their offices. And so it's not just how you relate to your colleagues, but like you said, how do you work to customers coming in, clients, it's really in every direction. Boards, we also think a lot of boards, some have approaches and probably many more should, is you're trying to diversify your board. How do you make it a safe space where everybody feels welcome?
I want to share something that my friend was telling me. She's from a country from Latin America, and she's married to a Canadian. And one person went to her office and asked, "Oh, for how long have you been married?" And she said, "Oh, for about 10 years. "Oh, and you're still with him?" Do you know what this means?
What do you think it means?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's try.
Yeah, no.
She was asking if she was with her Canadian husband after coming to Canada.
Kind of assuming that she was maybe using it as a means to get to
Exactly,
Canada.
Exactly. And she was in shock.
Yeah, right.
Or someone that is asking you all the time, "What did you mean? What? Mm-hmm. But they understand what you said.
Yeah.
They keep asking, what?
Yeah. I know also this happens, say, at medical clinics or bank tellers or whatever, where they see someone coming in and they make these assumptions about their English and they speak louder, right? They make these assume that maybe you can't understand English very well, so they start to talk really loud. Well, the person might speak perfectly good English, but that person still just talks loudly, kind of talks it down to them, because just in their head they make these assumptions like, "Oh, you obviously can't understand what I'm saying, so I'm going to shout,"
Yeah, those things happen, yeah. Or sometimes when someone asks you a question and then it's trying to change the wording, or something that happened to me. Someone was asking a question, and sometimes you don't have the answer immediately, not because of the language. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you're just thinking about the issue, about the situation, and this person is trying to reframe it and speaking slower. And yes, I know what you mean. It's not about my English speaking skills. I remember someone made fun of a word that I said, and "Oh, I heard you said this letter instead of that one," and it was not a nice word, the way she changed it. And, those things hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is interesting how many people, for a variety of reasons, as you said, it's not just race, it's not just skin color, it could be their weight, it could be their physical disability, it could be even just their, the way they their brain works, whatever it is. Like, how many people are the targets of these kind of comments that are really hurtful? And I feel like we can do better. Like, this is the world we live in. It's multicultural. I mean, I love the name of this channel because it is the Canadian culture. We can't just go through life with only kind of people who look like us, think like us, vote like us, worship like us. Like, let's do better. And I really think having these conversations, and whether it's a workshop on microaggressions or watching this channel, like, I think this is what the world needs.
Yeah.
It really is what the world needs.
Thank you, Robyn. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope you can come back later on and we keep discussing about these wonderful topics, because I know our audience will benefit a lot from all your knowledge and experiences.
Well, I'd love to come back anytime. It was great. Thanks for your interest in this topic and for inviting me to be here. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much to our wonderful audience once again, because you always have been there with us, following our content. Don't forget to click like, and see you next time at You Multicultural channel. I'm Jocelyn Gilbert, and I will be waiting for you next time. Bye-bye.